Welcome to another FPL video. We're looking ahead to Game Week 14 with my team selection. We're also going to be reviewing Game Week 13 and how that went, and also looking at my transfer plans and also captaincy thoughts heading into Tuesday's deadline. So let's get straight into the video. So in Game Week 13, I scored 72 points with a very positive Saturday, and that continued into Sunday with Tony and Vardy scoring and notching maximum bonus points. Now you can't see that represented on screen because the bonus points haven't been added in yet for the Sunday games, but Vardy and Tony both got full bonus points. Vardy notching a brace against Watford, and overall I went from around 90k to 43k, so a very healthy rank rise. And only 4 game weeks ago I was around 200k, but now I'm back around where I was towards the beginning of the season, where I was kind of wavering around 50k, 60 and 70. So I'm in a good position right now. Obviously I still want to push on even further, and I like my team a lot. Of course it's not perfect and there are definitely ways to improve it, which I'll be talking about very soon. Ramsdale got the clean sheet, 7 points, and very unlucky to be honest, because he actually made another save which didn't count on FPL. That would have been 6 saves, another save point, and he was on for the bonus points regardless, but they actually took it away towards the end, so he actually could have notched 9 points. But still very happy with Ramsdale, and I was pretty much expecting, or at least hoping, for an Arsenal clean sheet against Newcastle, and the Magpies struggle a lot against the Gunners, especially at the Emirates, and that continued into Saturday's game, the early kickoff. And then Ben Foster, he wasn't even in the squad, and it was Bachmann coming into the side again, but Foster, when he does return from injury, you would suspect he will be back into the fray, probably into the starting lineup once again. Now looking at my defence, pretty disappointing actually, all things considered, and last week it was my defence that got the bulk of my points. Now Trent Alexander-Arnold continued the tradition of a fullback getting a clean sheet and an attacking return, so very happy with him. But Cancelo, I mean, this guy was on for 8 points at one stage of the game, but then he got a yellow card, and then in the final dying embers of the game, Lanzini scores a stunner, and in the end Cancelo, instead of getting 6 to 8 points, he just gets the solitary point there. And the same goes for Reece James, obviously not as unlucky you could say as Joao Cancelo, but once again a yellow card and conceded to Manchester United. And Chelsea did struggle a bit despite dominating the game, and United almost got a really memorable victory there at Stamford Bridge. And Marcos Alonso, I was very impressed with some of the positions he was taking up, and even at the beginning of the game he almost got an assist for Hudson-Odoi. He should have buried that, to be honest, and also he was taking the corners, but obviously not very impressive, having double Chelsea defence and them conceding to Manchester United, but that was always possible. But I do like them heading into that Watford fixture. Will they both start? The good thing about Alonso is that he did get taken off slightly early, so maybe he's going to start once again against Watford. And to be honest, Chelsea are now in a position where they just can't afford to drop even more points. That's now in the last 3 game weeks, they dropped points to Burnley and Man United at home, and they really need to keep on delivering and getting these 3 points, because Liverpool and Man City are right on their coattails. But overall, very poor defence, even Livramento as well, 0 points. So as you can see, the defenders not really doing it this week, and that's what I mean, where one week the strikers could look very good, and that's what it looks like at the moment, the midfielders too, but the defence, obviously they've been so consistent all season, but there's going to be occasions like Game Week 13 where sometimes they're just not going to get you the points and be very unlucky. I do feel for Diaz owners or those who have double City defence, because I think they definitely deserved more clean sheets in recent weeks. Now looking at the midfield, Rafinha was also very disappointing, my only blank on the Saturday games, and to be honest that was kind of a game of low quality between Brighton and Leeds. If any team did deserve a victory, it was Brighton and Hove Albion. Leeds didn't really offer much, but once Bamford comes back into the mix, Rodrigo and Rafinha are pretty much settled back in the starting 11. I think that Leeds will look better. They're still not really too safe from relegation. They probably will be in a relegation fight this season, but I think they will improve. Unfortunately, they won't be to the same level of the last campaign, but still, you should expect an improvement there. The bad thing, though, is that once these players are back, they have just an awful run where they face the likes of Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal and City, and it's going to be very tough for Leeds. Looking at the midfield, very happy with my new signing, Diego Jota. I got him in for Foden, and Foden in the end he wasn't even on the bench against West Ham. Meanwhile, Jota scored inside 2 minutes and then ended up notching a brace. Only 1 bonus point. I probably would have argued he deserved 2, but then again with Jota, he does miss big chances. Didn't have a great game other than the goals, and that's why the bonus point system didn't really favour him. Then we look at Mohamed Salah. I did captain him, and ultimately I should have captained Vardy. Sometimes, weeks like this, going away from the kind of template captaincy, it can work in your favour. But having said that, some people would have done the same thing with João Cancelo or Reece James, and they got 1 point. So it could either go one of two ways, and sometimes you need a bit of luck to be on your side, as evidenced with João Cancelo. But with Salah, he's just so consistent. He's only blanked once this season in the Premier League, and that was back in Game Week 2 against Burnley. So that's 11 successive returns for the Egyptian, and he's just looking so good at the moment. Not a really great game though, to be honest, against Southampton, but he can still have that moment of magic and almost close to scoring himself. But of course, Salah is always dangerous, and statistically he is the best. Looking at my attack, another blank for Mikel Antonio, kind of carrying on the tradition for strikers. Raul Jimenez, for example, in other people's teams, he blanked against Norwich, same with Hwang, and to be honest, some kind of surprising results along the way, like that Norwich and Wolves game. But very happy with Jamie Vardy and Toney, like I mentioned before. 4 bonus points and 3 goals between them. But the thing with Ivan Toney now is that a lot of people might think, I need to get Ivan Toney into my team. But actually, in terms of non-penalty expected goals, Toney had exactly 0, so he offered nothing throughout the whole game. But that's why it's so important for a player to have penalties in their arsenal. Another example is Joshua King, who I actually mentioned before the deadline stream and in all my recent videos. With Sarr being out and also missing 2 penalties against United in Game Week 12, Joshua King should be on penalties, and even if he doesn't really have a great game from open play, he can get that penalty and bury it and get you some points. So that's what happened with Ivan Toney. Very fortunate to get 9 points, to be honest, but still, I think there's not too many standouts up front at this moment in time, so that's why I kind of kept the front three that I've had for a very long time, and finally my patience has been rewarded, and I'm hoping that Antonio can do the business next week against Brighton. As for the rest of my kind of squad, you see Townsend there. He conceded the penalty, he got a yellow card, so in the end I made the right decision in terms of my team selection, and the other one was Douglas Luiz, who was very fortunate, you could say, to have not been sent off. It did get rescinded, but to be honest, that was the right decision for it to be a yellow card instead of a red card. But I'm happy because now he's not suspended for future games, and I've got a bit better squad depth, you could say. But ultimately, I think the main weakness with the squad is squad depth, because Livramento isn't looking as good as he was once before. Townsend has just been awful since bringing him in on my wild card, and then Douglas Luiz is just pure bench fodder who could get you between 1 to 3 points. So I think I need to improve my midfield because Rafinha, Jota, Salah is pretty decent, but then you look at Townsend and Douglas Luiz, it's just not on. I've got plenty of money in the bank, so now let's see who I'm looking to get and how my team is lining up ahead of Game Week 14. So in goal I have Aaron Ramsdale, and he is facing Manchester United, and to be honest, it's not like we saw an amazing performance from the Red Devils, but they were resilient and they did give their all against Chelsea. And to be honest, under Ranić, this will be his first game in charge on Thursday. I think United will be up for it, and it will be a tough game for Arsenal. Of course, Arsenal could cause problems for United. At this moment in time, they have been the better team this season, but I think United will be well up for it. And with the quality they have, Sancho seems to be on lock now. Will that continue under Ranić like it was under Michael Carrick? Let's wait and see. And Ronaldo is on 799 career goals. So as I said on Twitter earlier, just congratulations, Ronaldo, in advance for scoring your 800th career goal against Arsenal. Having said that, I'm not going to be benching Ramsdale for Foster, especially with Foster being an injury concern. Of course, it's not the worst idea in the world, but ultimately I think I am going to be sticking with Ramsdale, and let's see what happens there. In terms of the defence, it looks very solid this week with James and Alonso facing Watford away. Will they both start? That's a different question in itself, but once again, Chelsea can't afford to drop points, and I think Chelsea should play their strongest team. Of course, I will naturally be a bit biased there because you want to get these points, of course, from these fullbacks, and I think they're great captainable options against the Hornets. And then João Cancelo, not an easy fixture actually against Villa nowadays. 2 games in a row that they've won under Steven Gerrard, and I think they could cause City some problems. And João Cancelo, obviously, he can still do really well with the assists, the goals. He still gets a lot of shots off, and he was very unlucky not to get an assist for Mahrez from one of his shots, actually. That was pretty decent and required a very good save. But I think Cancelo can still do well. I'm just a bit cautious about this week, and it's not really a fixture I'd want to captain him in. Of course, I could be wrong, and he could do very well, but I probably won't be considering him for the captaincy. Then we have Trent Alexander-Arnold facing Everton. He could be a decent option. Everton look very poor at the moment, but of course Richarlison should be back now after serving his suspension. And ultimately, Doucouré coming back into the mix. Obviously, he played against Brentford. He could make things difficult in the middle of the park against Liverpool in the Merseyside derby. But I don't know if I would captain Trent. Of course, a clean sheet is not actually out of the cards. I think they could do so. And Trent obviously has the attacking capabilities, but I don't think I'll be looking to captain him. And ultimately, from my defence, it's James or Alonso that I'm looking to put the armband on if I deviate from the Salah captaincy. Then Rafinha at home to Palace. I think that's a pretty decent fixture, to be honest. But once again, Rafinha looked pretty poor in the last game. But if anyone's going to do anything for Leeds United, it will be Rafinha or Rodrigo at this moment in time until Bamford comes back. But I think Rafinha is good this week, and I wouldn't want to sell him ahead of this game. Palace, of course, have been very impressive this season, but I think Leeds can still score against them, and Rafinha can be part of that. Then we have the double Liverpool attack with Jota and Salah. I'm very happy, to be honest, to have both of them. And Everton have been very poor defensively. And before this game week, at least, they had pretty much the worst underlying defensive numbers in the last 4 to 6 game weeks. Everton have been absolutely poor. And I think Salah and Jota can score a few goals past them. And Liverpool could ultimately win this by a landslide, potentially. But of course, a derby is different to any other game. And some teams, they could be very poor throughout the whole season, but for that one game or 2 games in a season, they turn up and they make things difficult for their opponents, no matter how much better they are. But I think Salah is a very good captaincy option this week, but I don't think you have to put the armband on him. And this could be a week where you deviate away from the captaincy, just like in the last few game weeks where Salah hasn't really been reaching the same heights as earlier in the season. But of course, it just takes one penalty, one moment of brilliance from Salah, and ultimately going against him could cost you very dearly. Now, looking at my front line, very happy with them this week, to be honest. Antonio facing Brighton. It's not an easy fixture on paper, but the Seagulls have actually not won in 9 games, despite being around 8th in the league table. But I think Antonio can finally score here, and I am backing him to finally break his kind of goal-scoring drought in the league. He's been doing very well for Jamaica during the international break, and for West Ham this season, he's been very impressive, or at least in the opening few game weeks. It hasn't really, gone that well since then, but I think he will break his goal-scoring drought against Brighton. I hope I'm right, of course. And then Vardy away to Southampton. At this moment in time, I think Southampton is a very good fixture, and the combination between Vardy and Maddison looked very good, and a lot of people have been mentioning Maddison recently, so a big shout out to all of you. And I actually did suggest that I think he's a good option over the winter break, James Maddison, especially over the next 3 or 4 fixtures, but I think I'd still just be keeping Jamie Vardy because the fixtures long term aren't that good for the Foxes, and I'm happy to keep Vardy for the next 3. And I have to say big condolences to everyone who has Heung-min Son, Reguilon, Harry Kane, etc. Very unlucky, for a game to be postponed out of nowhere. That happened to me last season. I think I had triple Spurs, or at least Son and Kane against Fulham, and that game got called off, I think, because of COVID. So these things can happen. Spurs have been very unlucky in terms of postponements in recent years, and you could argue, why didn't the Leicester or City games get postponed? Probably because at the start of the game, the snow wasn't as bad as it was from the beginning at Turf Moor. But then Tony, not the worst fixture in the world against Tottenham, but if I do make my new signing and get rid of Townsend, I think Tony could actually be dropped to the bench. And of course, his overall game against Everton wasn't particularly impressive, but still, I think he can still get that penalty and just notch an assist or a goal out of nowhere. But I would actually be inclined to bench Ivan Toney. If I had to pick someone to bench, it would be Toney if I do bring my new signing in right now, instead of holding and rolling the transfer and keeping Townsend for yet another week. Imagine if I did that. As for my bench, I've got Livramento first sub against Leicester. Of course, things could change once I make my transfer, and then it will be Tony first sub. I've got Townsend at the moment at home to Liverpool, and maybe, you never know, he could do alright and turn up for this game, but I really don't care. I'm going to be selling him eventually. And Douglas Luiz is third sub against Manchester City at home. But let's wait and see. I think my squad is in decent shape. I've got 1 free transfer and I've got plenty of money in the bank. So what are my transfer plans? Let's get straight into that right now. So with 1.4 million in the bank and 1 free transfer, what should I do with my squad? Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. But right now, and this is something I've been thinking about for a very long time, I'm looking to get rid of Townsend finally and replace him with Conor Gallagher. Now, I've been talking about this in my recent videos, including previews, transfer tip videos, and deadline and reaction streams, and Conor Gallagher remains a very good asset. but we have to take a few things into account. I haven't really discussed this in my team selection videos as such, but I think it's very important to make this clear. With Milivojevic back into the side, he takes set pieces away from Conor Gallagher, and that is a big part of Gallagher's assist threat and creativity stats. And of course, it's not ideal. And then you look at the fact that Eze is now back into the mix, coming off the bench, and if he starts in these upcoming games, then Gallagher could be pushed back into a deeper role. And of course, that isn't good for our fantasy prospects, but Gallagher remains a very good asset. Now, other options include, and I've always been banging on about them every single stream when people say, who should I replace Mbeumo with, or these kind of questions. Bowen remains a very good option, I think, especially from game week 16 or 18 onwards. And then you look at others like Smith Rowe, he's a good option. Maxwell Cornet, despite the game being suspended today, of course. And there are still a few others, but I think those are the main ones around 6 million and below that I would go for. Rafinha is a very good choice for the next 2 games, but beyond that, Leeds' fixtures are beyond poor, and Leeds themselves aren't really filling me with confidence at the moment. But I think Townsend to Gallagher is a simple move, and then I can start building some transfers. So maybe heading into, let's say, game week 16, for example, I can have 2 free transfers and have more flexibility and start to shake things up. I have shown some of my transfer plans in my recent streams, including yesterday, where I actually put Conor Gallagher in for Townsend, and instead of Rafinha, I put Bernardo Silva and Lamptey in for Livramento. Now, all of those kind of transfer plans still remain despite what happened in the Sunday games, and I think they all look pretty good, but I am still open to the idea of maybe changing my course and going for different players instead. So maybe instead of Gallagher, I can go for Cornet. Instead of Lamptey, I can go for another budget defender, maybe even Eric Dyer, although I don't think that's too likely at this moment in time anyway. And I can actually maybe go for someone else than what I've said before. But I've been talking about a lot of these options, and one of them is bound to get into my team eventually. But I think the most simple move I could make this week is getting Conor Gallagher in for Andros Townsend, and then I can start him over Ivan Toney, with Toney being my first sub and Livramento second. And I think my team looks very good heading into game week 14 and in a good position next weekend, obviously assuming everyone is kind of fit and COVID free heading into game week 15. So that's it. That's my team selection. Those are my transfer plans that I've discussed. Let me know what you think of them down in the comment section below. I offered my thoughts on the captaincy, my review of my game week 13 performance, which I'm very happy with, to be honest. Very healthy green arrows recently, and before that, of course, I was on a little kind of bad run of red arrow after red arrow, but finally getting a bit of consistency under the belt, and I'm very happy with my team, despite the fact that Alonso, that transfer didn't pay off right now anyway, or so far. I think it could do heading into game week 14 against Watford, and Jota, of course, an immediate impact, and he was probably the main difference between a kind of average week with a good one. But thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new around here. Very much appreciate everyone who became a channel member recently, who subscribed to the channel, who are sending super chats, those who have joined my Discord server. The link is in the description below. You can also join the league. The link is also there. And just a big thank you to everyone who's been supporting the channel and offering, advice or asking for advice, engaging with the community, and also showing massive waves of support, which is much appreciated from all over the globe. And good luck with game week 14. Hopefully you enjoyed game week 13 and had a good one. If you were unlucky and had Foden, Son, Kane, etc., don't beat yourself up about it. It's a bit of bad luck, to be honest. Well, to be honest, that's putting it kind of lightly. It's a lot of bad luck, but that can change. And also bear in mind with Spurs, but in terms of when they'd have the double game week based on this kind of postponement with Burnley, it would be probably after game week 21, unless they lose their quarterfinal match in the Carabao Cup against West Ham United, I believe. So if that were to happen, if they do lose, then the double game week for Spurs could actually happen in game week 21. But otherwise, if Spurs progress, they beat West Ham, then the double game week for Spurs would happen after game week 21. So just kind of a little heads up there, and follow pages that cover these sorts of rescheduling, like Ben Krelling. He was the one who kind of pointed that out. So thank you very much to everyone who watched once again, and I'll see you next time.